Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Herman Badillo, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the City University. The improvement of education affects all New Yorkers. This program will focus on the key educational issues and challenges before us all. My guest today is Carl Hayden, who is the Chancellor of the Board of Regents of the State of New York. The Board of Regents is the ultimate authority over educational policy in the state of New York. And right now, we're in the middle of a lot of turmoil on educational policy, so I thank you, Chancellor, for being with me today.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Let me get directly to the issues. You have been supporting high standards because you've been a member of the Board of Regents since 1990, and you have been Chancellor since 1995. High standards at every level, from K through 16. And you've been successful in saying that shortly every high school graduate will have to have a Regents diploma. And you supported the remediation resolution which I sponsored at the City University. And yet we find that now there seems to be a movement, a backlash towards all this, and people are saying that we should not have such high standards, and lawsuits are being brought to prevent that from coming about. How do you explain that reaction?
Well, first of all, I believe, as I know you do, in the power of expectation. I think that expectation defines everyone's life experience, and if you have a low expectation for a child, that lesson is never lost, particularly on that child. It really ought to be no surprise that there is a pushback now coming from some elements of the public. Higher standards are always to be honored in the abstract, but when they become real, that's a different matter. And now we're going to see whether our leaders have the political will, the stamina, and the fortitude to see this through.
Now, you and the Board of Regents are not going to back down, are you?
We are not.
Okay. When are the high standards in high school going to take effect?
Well, that process is already well underway. The basic design of this was approved in 1995, and we chose to phase it in over an extended period of time, 9 years, because we knew there would be those people who would say, too much, too fast, you can't do this, it's too precipitous. So the entire plan will not have been implemented until the year 2004. Last year, the first group of 11th graders took the English Regents exam, and that exam, each of them must pass in order to graduate. This year, 11th graders will be required to pass both the English and the Math Regents to graduate, but they have many attempts. They will be afforded many opportunities to get over the bar. And what happens is if a substantial percentage of them fail the exams? They won't get their high school diplomas? Well, that is an ultimate consequence in any system that has about it real accountability. But we think that the evidence is compelling that all of them can make it over the bar. Now, several of them, many of them, will require extra time, and they will require extra supports, and they will require personal intervention. Those of us who are running the system have an obligation to make those supports available, and to the extent that that means additional money, then additional money needs to be found.
Well, now, as you know, there is a lawsuit that's pending which says that New York City does not receive its fair share of educational funds based upon the percentage of students that it has compared to the percentage of students in the rest of the state.
I've had the privilege of testifying.
Okay,
in that
and
lawsuit.
what is the Regents' position on that?
Well, the Regents don't have a position. The Regents were originally a defendant in that lawsuit. I have a personal position, and I believe that the educational experience of children in the city of New York is inadequately funded. The greatest number of at-risk children in this state live in New York City, by far. We know that it costs more to bring an at-risk child to a successful educational conclusion. And yet, if you contrast what happens in the city with what happens in the suburbs, which are obviously very close by, what you'll find is those who need the most get the least. Now, that is not to say that this is a matter that can be resolved simply by assuring that New York City gets 38% of the money. I mean, that is incredibly formulaic, and frankly, it doesn't make any sense to me. But we do need to deal with what I think is the indefensible disparity that a child of the suburbs will have an educational experience that is valued at essentially twice that of that child's urban counterpart.
But how can we deal with that? The interesting thing about New York State is that the regions are not appointed by the governor, correct?
That is correct.
And so you have basically a Republican governor, and the regions are appointed by the state legislature, which, because of the structure of the election, is dominated by the Democrats in the Assembly.
Well, it is right now, but please recall that the system for selecting regents was put in place in 1947 when both houses of the legislature were dominated by the Republican Party and Tom Dewey was the governor.
Okay, but right now you have what is
Your point is taken.
A political
Your
problem.
point is taken.
And how can the regions work to ensure that more funds are made available to the city in order to rectify the problem that you identified?
Well, you know, the regents have been doing that for years, certainly for as long as I've been a regent. And I think it's no accident that there's been $2.4 or $2.6 billion of additional money devoted to educational finance in the last 3 years. Frankly, what's happened has in the main tracked our recommendations. So it is true that neither the governor or the legislature is obliged to follow the recommendation of the regents. But I think the regents take the lead in defining for the public what the schools need. And then the burden of persuasion to come in at a different number or a lower number then falls to the governor and the legislature.
Well, now tell me about the regions. You're from upstate New York, and tell me how many regions there are, how many are from the city, and how many from the suburbs, how many from the upstate areas?
There are 16 regions, 12 of whom represent geographic areas around the state. There are 5 regions, I think 5 among them, are from the city. 4 regents are elected at large, which means they are able to reside anywhere. The idea of geographic representation, I think, is designed to create a body, which is clearly a lay body, which will reflect not only parochial interests, but the broader interests of the state at large.
Well, now, the basic problem that we have, the disparity between the city and the state, do you think that will result in a higher percentage of students who will not be able to pass the exam in the city, and in the cities, not just New York City, but Albany and Buffalo and Rochester?
I think the problem is more daunting in the cities. We already know that, and it's not a problem that's restricted to this state. It's a national problem. But the fact is that there are ample examples around the country that children in an urban setting coming from conditions of poverty, irrespective of race, can achieve at very high levels if they're provided with appropriate supports, so that the task becomes putting those supports in place.
Now, my belief, and I'm sure yours, is that we have to start at the beginning, that the basic problem has been the whole concept of social promotion, beginning in the first grade, where kids were promoted automatically, so that by the time they get to high school, they're several years behind in reading, writing, or arithmetic.
It's very comfortable for the parents. It's not very good for the child.
But the parents, I find, particularly in the Hispanic community, which I know the best, are not aware, and have not been aware of the system of social promotion, because those of us who come from Latin America are used to a system where if you do your work, you pass. If you don't pass. Yeah. So they think that if they get a report card that shows they passed, that the students are performing. Then they are shocked to find out that they don't. But I find that there is a movement now on the part of some civil rights groups to oppose the elimination of social promotion. What would you say to them?
Well, I wouldn't agree with them. I mean, I think one of the reasons you're finding more vocal opposition now is that people are coming to understand the true state of the schools. And we are obliging the schools to report to the public how well they're doing, not only as against an objective standard, but as well as compared with like communities elsewhere. And those statistical profiles have proven energizing. The public, when it has knowledge, can be a powerful instrument.
Energizing and in some cases frightening, because Chancellor Crew estimates that next year, when the full impact of the elimination of social promotion comes into being, that maybe 360,000 of the 1 million students may be left behind.
Well, I don't think that anything like that number will be left behind, but you know, you and I are witnessing a failed political dynamic. These children have needed more for as long as each of us has been alive. And the political dynamic has failed to recognize that, or if it has recognized it, it has failed to act upon it. And I think by shining the light on the singular needs of this population of children, we will compel the political dynamic to change.
Well, I would certainly hope so, because it has been said with respect to the Black and Hispanic community that the average 17-year-old Hispanic or Black performs in reading, writing, and arithmetic at the average of the 13-year-old white kid. And that, of course, that disparity is quite serious.
Well, whenever there is a dual standard, one high and one low, it is always true that that lower standard is the one that the child of color will be asked to observe, whether that child is African American or Latino or whatever. That puts that child at a tremendous disadvantage. And what I would hope would be that the leadership of the African American and Hispanic communities would come to realize that the future of their children requires that everyone advocate for a higher standard, because when those children get out into the marketplace, whether it's in academia or whether it's in a job setting, no one's going to give them a lower level at which to operate. They're going to be obliged to operate at the same level as everybody else. Expectation raises the effort. And by the way, the young people have some responsibility for themselves. I mean, as we go through these conversations, one of the things I'm struck by is the fact that almost invariably nobody talks about the student's responsibility to himself or herself. They have a role to play as well, and they will respond to higher expectations. We're seeing that happening already. I mean, people said, you ask young people to pass that English Regents, they will never do it. Well, 93% of the children in this state have done it.
What about the parents? How are they doing?
I think the parents are doing less well. I'm much more confident in the response of the young people than I'm in the response of the adults.
Okay. We'll be back after these announcements.
Her daddy left home this morning.
I'll be there.
Forever.
Wait and see.
She'll be twice as likely to get pregnant in her teens. 37% more likely to abuse drugs.
'Cause I love you.
Even if you don't live with your kids, your emotional and financial support gives them a better chance.
The best friend you ever had.
My guest today is the Chancellor of the Board of Regents, Carl Hayden. Before we go to the City University, let's go back to the elementary and secondary schools. There is another movement, a movement by a segment of the population that has become increasingly dissatisfied with the public schools. And that led to the charter school approval by the state legislature last year. What has been the experience that the Board of Regents has had with charter schools?
Well, we would like very much to see charter schools succeed. I have a keen interest in testing the power of deregulation, and this is a unique opportunity for us. At the same time, I don't think charters are panaceas. I don't think vouchers are a panacea. I don't think there's any easy solution. We live in a time where people quest for easy solutions. Getting education right is very hard work, and no one should be deluded. So that while we're going to do our darndest to make sure that the charters that we approve and the charters that we oversee that have been recommended to us by CUNY succeed, we're also going to be reviewing, I think, very carefully the extent to which they really do represent innovation, or whether they're merely a drain on the public treasury and the adjacent public schools.
And you think the 100 schools that were approved by the state legislature will give you that experience?
I think so.
When do you think you'll know?
I would want to give it a full test. My sense is that we won't have a useful answer until about 5 years.
All right, now, one last thing on public education, and that is the so-called schools under Regents Review in New York City. There's a very large number of them which have been under Regents Review because they've been doing so poorly.
It wouldn't take much to generate a much larger number.
Yes, well, what is the future of those schools?
Well, I mean, I think what we've seen is that when those schools have been identified, what has followed is a level of activity that has had the result of raising the level of performance of those schools and increasing the life prospects of the children who attend those schools. So that, to that extent, it's been a good thing. The usual pattern is it starts as, oh my God, not my school, and people are mortified. But then they put their shoulders to the wheel, the entire community gets engaged, the Chancellor and the Board of Ed pay some special attention to those schools, and they clearly improve, and then we move on to the next set. I mean, it's as effective an urban strategy as there is, but it still strikes me as being at the margins.
All right, now let's get to higher education. I think from all the turmoil and activity in the past year, this has been one of the more controversial issues that has come before the Board of Regents. The resolution that I sponsored, the Board of Trustees of the City University, to phase out remedial instruction from the senior colleges over a period of years. How did you find that problem at the Board of Regents?
Well, as you can tell, it was a problem that divided my membership sharply and starkly.
Well, I'm used to winning by a narrow margin. You know, so.
Well, there was no margin to spare here, believe me. The vote was 9-6, as you know. And if I had to try to describe where the fault line was, I would say that those who voted against the proposal really didn't accept as credible CUNY's assurances as to how many young people would be affected, whether or not there is real articulation or can be real articulation between the community colleges and the senior colleges, so that
articulation means being able to transfer from a community college to senior college.
So that a young person in New York City can do what's routinely done upstate, which is parents adopt as a money-saving strategy entering the child in the community college with the full expectation that the baccalaureate, the 4-year degree, will be acquired at Cornell, Harvard, SUNY Binghamton, whatever.
No, I agree with you on that, because I've been told by many students that it's easier to transfer from a community college to NYU or a private school than it is to go to another of these CUNY colleges, and we have moved in the last meeting of the board.
On the 22nd, on the same day that we met.
That's right, to change that.
Well, and I think that's vitally important. And then I suppose the other and probably the most important consideration on the part of my colleagues who voted against this proposal was they really didn't believe that the number of students who would be affected was as small as it was represented to be. And of course, the number that we generated was 1,750. The number that you generated ended up being 150 or thereabout. But the analysis went through the same set of numbers, so there really wasn't any disparity there. They simply don't believe any of that. They think this is a roadblock, and they think that entry through a community college portal is a dead end. All right? Well, I don't believe that.
It shouldn't be, no, not at all.
But I will also tell you that I see it as part of our obligation, both to you and to the people of the city and the people of this state, that we trust in your assurances, but going back to John Foster Dulles, that we verify those assurances as well.
I made it clear at the beginning that I accepted the Regents as the ultimate authority, and that's why we had that extensive review. And certainly you want to monitor, but I want to monitor what goes on too, because what worries me in the most fundamental sense is the low percentage of students who graduate from the senior colleges and the community colleges, because access without success in graduation to me is meaningless.
That goes to the heart of the argument that I made, and I didn't crib it from you. Believe it or not, I came to this independently. I really think if you're viewing opportunity as the core issue here, the real tragedy that I see in analyzing the numbers are the thousands of young people who enter and do not acquire a degree after 6 years. Those numbers are real.
And even after 8 years, you know, in the community colleges, we have an analysis that shows that over an 8-year period for a 2-year college, overall, only 34% of the students receive a 2-year degree at the city university. That's outrageous. And as you know, we have at the senior colleges a far lower percentage than the senior colleges at the state university, which I find unacceptable.
And I find it equally unacceptable. And if you do that analysis and apply it to the population of students who are in the SEEK program, then the numbers become truly scary.
Yes, as far as I'm concerned, the next move on my part, and I believe on the part of the trustees and Chancellor Goldstein, will be to see to it that we have a much higher graduation rate at the community colleges and at the senior colleges.
And in order for access to be converted into opportunity, it must be the opportunity to acquire something of value, which means that it must mean exposure to a rich curriculum. It must mean exposure to a rigorous examination system, and at the end, it must mean that the student is able to acquire a degree that he or she values and that society values.
And able to pass the test. As you know, we've had a huge problem in teacher education, where we had students in some of the colleges who get a degree in education and then cannot pass the teacher's exam, so they can't teach.
Well, and of course that becomes circular, and many of those people, even without a credential, go back into the failing schools in the city, and here we go.
So we have a long agenda. I'm sorry we don't have more time. I wish we would, but I look forward to working with you and also to having you back on this program.
I've enjoyed the opportunity immensely. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Being with us. You can reach us by email at our website, www.cunytv.cuny.edu, or write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. We look forward to hearing from you.